Story 1. When I had reached the age of 18, I was employed as a babysitter for a family with 3 young sons who resided on the other side of town from my location. These children were aged 3, 5, and 7, respectively, and for the purpose of this account, I will refer to them as Adam, 3, Bobby, 5, and Chris, 7, collectively using the initials ABC. Adam and Chris presented the least challenge to care for. Adam was an exceptionally well-behaved toddler, and Chris typically occupied himself with video games and television. Bobby, in stark contrast, exhibited a highly unpredictable temperament, was notably selective about his food, and proved difficult to coax into sleep. My professional relationship with this family had spanned several months, leading to a degree of familiarity with their mother, Lucy, who was single-handedly raising her children. Their dwelling was a reasonably modest, middle-class residence, with Lucy receiving financial and other forms of assistance from her parents. Each of the 3 boys possessed his own private room. At that particular time, Lucy's employment involved night shifts, which meant my babysitting duties consistently extended until approximately midnight on weekdays. This arrangement proved compatible with my college schedule, as my classes typically commenced in the afternoon, allowing for a balanced routine in terms of work and rest. One evening, after engaging in some Planet Play Week games with Chris, I escorted Adam to his bed, followed shortly thereafter by Bobby. Chris's designated bedtime was 9:30 p.m., while Bobby's was 9 p.m. After ensuring Bobby was comfortably tucked in, I began instructing Chris to prepare for bed by changing into his pajamas once his current game concluded. Chris, however, adamantly requested that I participate in one additional game of Planet Play Tennis with him. I agreed, striking a deal that he would proceed directly to bed afterward. During our game, Bobby's cries for me echoed from his room upstairs. I promptly paused the game and ascended the stairs. Upon entering his room, he declared that there was a monster in his closet. I responded with a laugh, gently pinching his cheek, and uttered a phrase to the effect of, "There's no such thing as monsters," while offering to leave the closet door ajar to enhance his sense of security. I then inquired if this made him feel better, to which he simply nodded. Chris, from downstairs, was vocally annoyed, urging me to return, so I resumed our game of tennis, which we eventually finished without further interruptions. At this juncture, Chris headed upstairs to change into his pajamas and brush his teeth, leaving me alone in the kitchen, watching television. It was then that Bobby's distressed cries from upstairs resonated once more. I returned to his room, where I found him concealed beneath his blankets. He reiterated that there was a monster in the closet and insisted I heard it. My gaze fell upon the closet door, which was now fully closed. I scrutinized it for a considerable period before turning back to Bobby and questioning why he believed a monster was present. He explained, "I keep hearing it moving." I inquired if he wished for me to investigate, and he shook his head in refusal. Despite his protest, I advanced closer to the closet, prompting him to warn, "Don't." I did not take his apprehension seriously until I, too, discerned a distinct sound emanating from within the closet. It was undeniably the sound of something alive inside, perhaps tapping against the door or situated behind it. Bobby then whispered, "See." I spun around, lifted Bobby into my arms, and declared, "We're going to another room." I also retrieved Chris from the bathroom and led both boys into Adam's room, where I secured the door. Adam's room and Lucy's room shared a connected Jack and Jill style bathroom, featuring 2 entrances. I entered this bathroom and telephoned Lucy, quietly asking if there was any possibility of an animal being present within the house or within its walls, given the sounds Bobby had reported and that I had now heard myself. She immediately sounded worried and instructed me to inspect the closet. I kept her on the phone as I proceeded back to Bobby's room. My discovery that the closet door was now ajar unequivocally confirmed the presence of an intruder within the house. I relayed this information to Lucy, who became instantly frantic, asserting that it was most likely her unstable ex-partner and urging me to evacuate the children from the house. A sudden sensation of imminent danger washed over me, a fear that her ex would abruptly appear and confront me. I rushed to Adam's room and successfully guided the 3 children out. Just as we exited, I distinctly heard the front door of the house slam shut. I cautiously peered into the living room. No one was visible, but the front door was firmly closed, suggesting the individual had made a hasty departure when the opportunity arose. I then proceeded to lock the door and immediately dialed 911. Lucy arrived home prematurely from work and was present when the police responded. Without surveillance cameras or other evidence, there was no concrete proof that it was her ex-partner. Although her ex is Adam's biological father, Lucy intentionally kept them separated due to their contentious past, details of which I cannot disclose to protect her privacy. In essence, he struggled to accept their separation, and she had very recently blocked his phone number, which could logically explain his potential forced entry into the residence. The police advised Lucy to change the locks on the doors and implement similar security measures. Lucy acknowledged my discomfort with remaining in the house for some time after the incident. Consequently, she began arranging for the children to stay with a relative or for one of her parents to come and supervise them. I remain unaware of subsequent developments, as our communication eventually ceased. I harbored some disapproval regarding her willingness to let me check the closet, particularly given her pre-existing suspicion that her ex-partner was involved. It was, without a doubt, a truly terrifying experience. Story 2. I had just turned 14 years old, and it was the summer of 2012. I was actively seeking employment. My grandmother had informed me about a family she was acquainted with, who had 2 boys named Alexander and Danny. Alexander was 10 years old, and Danny was 5. I was quite enthusiastic about securing a summer job and earning some additional spending money. I went to their residence with my grandmother to meet the family, and they seemed sufficiently welcoming. The 2 boys appeared easy to manage, exhibiting no signs of being childish or prone to whining. In fact, the boys and I quickly established a good rapport, playing with their toy trucks. I arranged a babysitting date with the parents, who fortunately had a dinner engagement the following evening. Thus, the next night, it was time for me to go to their house. It was a warm, humid, and rainy evening. Upon entering the house, I found the parents in the final stages of preparing to depart. They provided me with a written document outlining house rules, prohibitions for the children, and their established routines. Noteworthy was a small handwritten addition on the side that stated, "Danny swears he hears tapping on his window every night, but not to believe it because they think it's just a silly story that kids make up." Being only 14 myself, reading this was somewhat unsettling, but I eventually dismissed it from my thoughts. The night proceeded calmly. We watched television and played with toys. The boys caused no trouble, but when I informed them it was time to prepare for bed, I observed Danny beginning to procrastinate and showing signs of distress. I disregarded his behavior, attributing it to his age of 5 and a natural desire to extend his waking hours. Eventually, I managed to settle both boys down, and they went to sleep. Approximately an hour and a half later, at around 10 p.m., I heard Danny call out for me, his voice groggy yet loud. I hurried to his side and inquired about the problem. He reported that he had heard the tapping noise again. An immediate feeling of unease and nervousness enveloped me, but I simply flicked on the light and peered out the window. There was nothing discernible outside apart from the pervasive darkness and the solar-powered lights from the neighbor's driveway. I calmly assured Danny that the sound was likely just an insect, given that it was summer. He appeared to relax upon hearing this and lay back down. As I stepped out of the room to close his door, I distinctly heard a faint tapping noise against his window. Chills ran down my spine as I promptly switched the light on again and looked out the window. Once more, there was nothing visible. I continued to convince myself that it was merely bugs colliding with the window, yet a profound intuition urged me to take action. I reassured Danny not to worry as I opened the window and loudly declared, "This is private property. I'm going to call the authorities." Moments after my pronouncement, I heard a hurried, frantic scurrying sound moving into the dense forest located across the yard. By this point, goosebumps had formed all along my arms and legs, and I immediately proceeded to genuinely contact the police. I then telephoned the parents right after, who were, thankfully, already en route home. The police officers who arrived did not appear at all surprised by my account. They revealed that they had been receiving similar reports in the vicinity for quite some time, concerning an unknown individual approaching people's windows at night, looking through them, and tapping on them. They stated they received calls reporting identical incidents almost every week. Danny's parents had simply never believed him, presumably dismissing his reports as typical childish stories or products of imagination, but it had turned out to be a very real and concerning situation. The authorities conducted a thorough search of the entire neighborhood but never located the person responsible. Following that night, I communicated to the family, in the most polite manner possible, that I no longer felt comfortable supervising their children. To this day, I continue to ponder what might have transpired had circumstances been different. For instance, if the window had, God forbid, been unlocked or open. Perhaps, sometimes, parents should not so readily dismiss what their young children recount as mere imagination. Story 3. This event occurred when I was 8 years old, and my younger sister was 6. It is a memory so profoundly scarring that I recall it with immense clarity even now as an adult, and it has remained with me throughout my life. Our parents engaged a one-time babysitter for a specific weekend when they would be absent on a couple's trip. This individual was a 16-year-old boy who had responded to an advertisement my mother had placed in the local public library. Coincidentally, he had attended the same high school as my parents, which I believe instilled in them a greater sense of security regarding his suitability. He was responsible for supervising us for 3 nights, commencing on Thursday and concluding on Sunday. His name was Nathan. I do not know his surname, but if I did, I would disclose it. Most of the first night remains indistinct in my memory. After all, I was only 8. I recall little beyond playing Gadget and Glank on my quest station in the basement throughout the entire night, as I was completely engrossed in the game. The subsequent day, Friday, followed a similar pattern. I spent such an extensive period playing Gadget and Glank that Nathan apparently came downstairs to establish a rapport with me and offered to play together. He informed me that he also enjoyed the game, so we engaged in the multiplayer versus mode. From what I recollect, I genuinely had fun and began to develop a positive impression of Nathan. The following day, my friend Zachary visited, and we played soccer in the backyard. Nathan volunteered to officiate the game, joining us outside with my little sister. Fundamentally, from the perspective of my 8-year-old mind, he appeared to be a completely normal individual. Zachary departed not long after we had all consumed the pizza that Nathan had ordered, presumably using funds my parents had allocated for food that night. Before going to sleep, I was playing on my handheld Pocket Vision device in bed when Nathan entered and inquired if I wanted to play more video games. I am confident that I respectfully declined, stating that I was tired. He departed as expected, but this was not the end of the matter. As a child, I was consistently a heavy sleeper, a characteristic I no longer possess, but when I was 8, waking up in the middle of the night was an infrequent occurrence. Therefore, awakening in my completely dark room that night was an unquestionably peculiar event. I distinctly recall turning onto my side after hearing my door softly closing. I looked across the room toward the door, and as my eyes slowly adjusted to the profound darkness, I perceived someone standing in the corner of the room. Before I could fully comprehend what was transpiring, or utter a scream, or react in any way, I heard Nathan utter a quiet shoo and whisper, "It's me." I did not respond, but then he gradually drew nearer to my bed, pulled the covers off of me, and I unequivocally believe he was on the verge of getting into the bed himself before I screamed something along the lines of, "Stop." He immediately froze. I swiftly exited my bed and left the room. I proceeded to my little sister's room, retrieved a blanket from beneath her bed, and lay down on the floor, trembling and feeling profoundly bewildered and uncomfortable. Throughout the entirety of the following day, I did not encounter Nathan. I was aware of his presence within the house because he had provided breakfast for my little sister. However, I realized he was actively avoiding me now. I was unable to contact my parents directly as I did not know either of their cell phone numbers. It was an unusually long and unsettling day, during which I remained primarily in my room, playing games with my little sister. Nathan did not enter our room even once. That night, for obvious reasons, I found myself unable to sleep. I am uncertain how much time elapsed before I heard my door creak open once again. This time, I deliberately did not look up. I lay motionless until I heard the door close, followed by a few moments of silence. Afterward, I looked up toward the door, but he was not there. I switched on the lamp to confirm this. But even at 8 years old, I intuitively knew he was once again prowling around. I felt a strong urge to sleep in my sister's room, convinced in my mind that I needed to protect her. I rose, gathered my pillows and blanket, and made my way to my sister's room. And behold, in the absolute darkness of the room, Nathan was already halfway toward my sister's bed. I shouted at him to move away from her, and he attempted to calm me down, claiming he was just checking on her. He hastily exited the room, and I immediately locked the door. That was the final time I ever saw him. The next morning, I woke up on my sister's floor and suggested we play games in her room until Mom and Dad returned, which, thankfully, was early in the day. We heard our parents arrive home and speak with Nathan outside, but we did not leave her room until he had departed. My parents inquired why I had slept on her floor. I do not recall what explanation I offered, but I know with certainty that I never disclosed the actual reason. In fact, I never did. I often regret not having told them all those years ago, so that Nathan could have faced consequences. I am afraid that because of my silence, he might have, at some point, successfully harmed a child. It is a sorrowful truth that I kept this experience bottled up throughout my entire childhood, simply because I felt too embarrassed and awkward to confide in anyone.